Mr. President and gentlemen of the Board of Directors and citizens. 1/3 of the population of the South is the Negro race. No enterprise seeking the material, civil, or moral welfare of this section can disregard this element of our population and reach the highest success. I but convey to you, Mr. President and Directors, the sentiment of the masses of my race when I say that no way have the value and manhood of the American Negro been more fittingly and generously recognized than by the managers of this magnificent exposition at every stage of its process. It is a recognition that will do more to cement the friendship of the two races than any occurrence since the dawn of our freedom. Not only this, but the opportunity here afforded will awaken among us a new era of industrial progress. Ignorant and inexperienced, it is not strange that in the first years of our new life we began at the top instead of the bottom, that a seat in Congress or the state legislature was sought more than real estate or industrial skill, that the political convention or the stump speaking had more traction than starting a dairy farm or truck garden. A lost ship at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel. From the mast of unfortunate vessel has seen a signal, "Water, water, we die of thirst." The answer from the friendly vessel at once came back, "Cast down your bucket where you are." A second time the signal, "Water, water, send us water," ran up from the distressed vessel, and was answered, "Cast down your bucket where you are." And a third and fourth signal for water was answered, "Cast down your bucket where you are." The captain of the distressed vehicle, at last heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket, and it came up full of fresh, sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon River. To those of my race who depend on bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations from the southern white man, who is their next-door neighbor, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down in making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Cast it down in agriculture, mechanics, in commerce, in domestic service, and in the professions. And in this connection it is well to bear in mind that whatever other sins the South may be called to bear, when it comes to business, pure and simple, it is in the South that the Negro is given a man's chance in the commercial world. And in nothing in this exposition more eloquent than in emphasizing this chance. Our greatest danger is that in the great leap from slavery to freedom, we may overlook the fact that the masses of us are to live by the productions of our hands, and fail to keep in mind that we shall prosper in proportion as we learn to dignify and glorify common labor and put brains and skill into the common occupations of life, shall prosper in proportion as we learn to draw the line between the superficial and substantial, the ornament gewgaws of life and the useful. No race can prosper till it learns that there is as much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. It is at the bottom of life we must begin, and not at the top. Nor should we permit our grievances to overshadow our opportunities.
Booker Taliaferro Washington was an American educator, author, orator, and advisor, born April 5, 1856 to November 14, 1915, when the gentleman passed. Between 1890 and 1915, Washington was the dominant leader in the African American community and of the contemporary black elite. Washington was from the last generation of black American leaders born into slavery and became the leading voice of the former slaves and their descendants. They were nearly oppressed in the South by disenfranchisement and Jim Crow discriminatory laws enacted in the post-Reconstruction of Southern states in the late 19th and early 20th century. Washington was a key proponent of African American businesses and one of the founders of the National Negro Business League. His base, a historically black college in Tuskegee, Alabama, at which he served as principal. As lynchings in the South reached a peak in 1895, Washington gave a speech known as Atlanta Compromise, which brought him national fame. He called for black progress through education and entrepreneurship rather than trying to challenge directly the Jim Crow segregation and disenfranchisement of black voters in the South. Blacks were solidly Republican in this period, having gained emancipation and suffrage with President Lincoln and his party. Washington also believed that Americans should concentrate all their energies on industrial education and accumulation of wealth, and the consolation of the South. He valued the industrial education as it provided critical skills for the jobs then available to the majority of African Americans at this time, as most lived in the South, which was overwhelmingly rural and agricultural. An autobiography was written about his humble beginnings from slavery to a free man. So let's get some more information from narrators, authors, and more qualified than me personnel speaking on the behalf of Booker T. Washington, live and currently about him. Editor, roll clips, fair use.
In the 1895 Atlanta Compromise speech, in which Washington pushed for black uplift through self-improvement and attempting to dignify and glorify common labor, as opposed to attempting to directly challenge and fight back against Jim Crow segregation. People tend to give Washington a hard time about this, and in some ways, that's understandable. But we should remember the larger context of this moment. This was a period of time when black lynchings were peaking throughout the South. Many black folks were scared, and as the most prominent black leader, Washington was trying to reassure the larger white community that if they just let black people be, farm their land, work their jobs, get a basic education, they wouldn't push back against the larger Jim Crow system. But just because he championed gaining acceptance from whites through industriousness and labor, that didn't mean that he was necessarily keen on the idea of black people integrating into the larger white community. Again, he was thinking of black economic stability, but also safety from racial violence. In the Atlanta Compromise speech, he said, quote, "In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the fingers, yet one as the hand, in all things essential to mutual progress." He was basically saying, you all do your thing, we'll do our thing, and everything will be okay. Cool?
But with this legal protection, former slaves began to exercise their rights. They participated in the political process by direct action, such as staging sit-ins to integrate streetcars, by voting in elections, and by holding office. Most African Americans were Republicans at the time, and because they could vote and were a large part of the population, the Republican Party came to dominate politics in the South, just like today, except totally different. There were about 2,000 African Americans who held office during Reconstruction, and the vast majority of them were not corrupt. Consider, for example, the not corrupt and amazingly named Pinckney B.S. Pinchback, who from 1872 to 1873 served very briefly in Louisiana as America's first black governor, and went on to be a senator and a member of the House of Representatives. By the way, America's second African-American governor, Douglas Wilder of Virginia, was elected in 1989. Having African-American office holders was a huge step forward in terms of ensuring the rights of African Americans, because it meant that there would be black juries and less discrimination in state and local governments when it came to providing basic services. There were important achievements, especially a school system that, while segregated, did attempt to educate both black and white children. And even more importantly, they created a functioning government where both white and African American citizens could participate.
Hey guys, it's Jose, your regular Joe Blow again, keeping an eye out and my ears open to history. Yes, today we are going back in time. Yes, today we are going back in time to learn from our ancestors how conservative they were. I was lied to for so long by the Democratic Party. It will be my mission to bring light to these lies, as said in Ephesians 5:11, which says, "And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them." Now 6:11 I'll leave up to you guys to read. R.I.P. Mr. Booker T. Washington. Full salute, sir. I will emulate you in my further endeavors. You guys should too. These are great teachings to practice moving forward. Thank you guys as always for the support. Do your own research and seek ye the truth. That's all that we want on this side. No handout. Guys, see you on the next one. Stay free.